Hello everyone, welcome back to Talking Wolves. My name is Tom, here bringing you the second instalment in this season series, What We Learned, where I go over all of the key talking points that have been discussed throughout the Wolves fan base during the previous month's fixtures. Obviously in the last episode, I looked at all the key talking points from August. Obviously now we're getting into, well, we are in October when this episode will come out. I'm going to be looking at all the key talking points from September, going over, my thoughts on each situation, and obviously getting some reaction from everyone in the comments down below. Now, I just wanted to say a big thank you to everyone who watched the first episode. Got a really good amount of comments. I'm sorry if I didn't get around to answering all of them, but I did my best to try and get through as many of them as possible. And I do obviously appreciate you all watching the videos and, taking the time out of your day to sit and have this little chat that we're going to be doing every month. I think what I'm going to do from now on is at the start of every episode, we're going to have one question, which is like sort of the big question of the month. And make sure to respond to that in the comments down below, just so we can see where everyone's heads are at. So today's question is, who is your starting midfield? Who is your starting midfield? Now, this can mean that you have two midfielders and Cunha as a 10, whatever you want, okay? What is your midfield? I think that's been a little bit of I've seen a few discussions about that cropping up online, and I thought it was worth a go to see what everyone thinks. So comment down below. Okay, so without further ado, let's get into the first talking point of this month. Okay, so I've sort of named this games of two halves, because pretty much every game that Wolves have played so far this season has been, we can point to, the old saying, a game of two halves, because starting with some of the positives, I think it's important to start with some positives here, because we haven't really had much of that on social media. I think it's good to at least give credit where credit's due. Wolves are very good in the first half of football games. They're an excellent first half team. In fact, if games ended at half time, I know it's not a very good argument, but just for the sake of this point, hear me out. If games ended at half time, Wolves would be on 8 points currently, with a goal difference of, I think, -1 if my maths are correct, and we would be sitting in 11th in the Premier League table. Whilst it's a hypothetical and obviously games don't finish at half time, the point is that Wolves start games well and they keep their structure well. What I've noticed is that we press better, we hold our shape better, we look far more balanced. I mean, the Chelsea game is a perfect example, right? We didn't look completely solid, but we were attacking with purpose, we were attacking directly. And then in the second half, when we just fell apart, conceded the goals, we lost rhythm. And I think that's been one of the key concerns for me, is whether it's fitness or mentality, or if it's both. And that's the issue that I think a lot of us have at the moment. We're questioning the fitness of the players, the mentality of the players, because we're getting into half-time in good positions. But for some reason, there's just something that clicks at half-time where they just come out a completely different team. I mean, the Villa game was glaring for me. We go in 1-0 up at half-time, having played a really good half away from home. Pressed Villa well, got, obviously, forced them into an error, which led to the goal. And then in the second half, we just put all 10 men behind the ball and didn't even have, I don't even think we had a shot in the second half. So if you look at the 3 games that we played in the Premier League, so it was Newcastle, Villa, Liverpool. You look at those 3 games, you think, okay, Newcastle game, we were really coasting. And this wasn't even a second half collapse. This was just like a 5-minute collapse. We get to conceded in the 75th minute. And then again 5 minutes later. Villa game, similar pattern, do okay in the second half in terms of limiting the opponent, but not exactly kind of getting out much ourselves. And then we concede 1 goal, and then it just seems as though Wolves lose the shape. They lose their heads a little bit. For me, it feels like we're leaning too much into the emotional side of the game rather than keeping within the tactics of the game. I think in the first half, we do that very well. I think the concentration levels are usually pretty high, apart from the Liverpool game, obviously conceding right at the end of the first half. But generally, we keep our shape pretty well, we attack pretty well, and we look like we have some sort of rhythm. But I do feel like in the second half, we sort of lose a little bit of that. And that's where I think you have to question what is being said at half time. You know, we're not in really good winning form. Like the last game we won in the Premier League was a Luton at home. We haven't kept a clean sheet since February. That sort of thing, yes, granted, you know, we have to take last season into account, the fact that we had a very limited squad because of the injuries, but that carries over. And when you've got a team that is in bad form, you forget how to win games mentally. You just forget how to sit in and just be solid and not collapse. And I think Wolves are in that sort of little dangerous zone now where, because of the form we're in and because it's sort of carrying over from last season, reminiscent of, you know, Bruno Lage's horrific second season. I think we're in a dangerous position now where the team it looks as though they've forgotten how to win games, how to manage games out. And for me, that's a little bit concerning. I think it's something that Gary O'Neill can turn around. We'll touch on him later. But in terms of Wolves as a Jekyll and Hyde team, I think we very much are that at the moment, which is something we've just got to get out of our system. But the positive signs are there. Like, they are there. Wolves, we've had some good passages of play. We've scored some good goals. I think Larson had a good start. It's sort of drifted in and out of it. Same thing with Cunha. But it's not, we don't look hopeless. I think we've definitely been unlucky. I think the penalty was a little bit harsh. And I do think that it's been like little individual errors that have cost us, which I don't know if you can't always put that down to bad luck, but I do think overall the performances haven't been bad enough for us to be sitting bottom. I don't feel as though we're a team that should be bottom of the league. Apart from the Chelsea game, yes, we got battered, but we've been very much in a lot of the games that we've played up until like we have that spell where we just concede a bad goal or whatever it is. There's just something not quite clicking. But I do think that as a team, I think we've had a very tough run. We've had a very tough start to the season. And I think if we can just build a little bit of confidence and some of these things start to click in place and some of these, you know, some of our new signings start to bed in a little bit, I do think we're going to be okay. I just think, you know, obviously this tale of two halves thing has to sort of end really. But I do think that there's been a lot of positive signs with the play. I think defensively we don't look bad at all. Honestly, I don't think we look that bad. I mean, everyone thought we were going to get battered by Liverpool 2-1 in isolation. Not a bad result. Yes, we could have gone for it more in the second half. But again, this is the thing with Wolves in the first and second halves. We just don't have the same intensity. But I don't think we look that bad. So whether things can turn around, we'll have to wait and see. But I do think that there is definitely something there. You know, that all it needs to do is to just click and we just get one win on the board, and I think then we'll start to get some momentum. That brings me on to my second point, which is Gary O'Neill is under pressure, seriously under pressure. I've not seen such a fast downward trajectory in the trust of supporters for me in a little while. Honestly, I'm very surprised at the amount of people that, even on Facebook, not just Twitter, that are seriously questioning Gary O'Neill at the moment. Yes, you know, I understand it. Look, I understand it first of all. I want to make it absolutely clear that I don't think the people that are leaning on Gary O'Neill out are completely, you know, out of their minds. There's reasoning behind it. I think it's one win in like 17 now, which is insane. I'll put the cons out first. So I think what the issues with Gary O'Neill at the moment has been, I think, three things. I think it's been the in-game management, the poor run of form, and his attitude in the press. I think those three things are sort of weighing against him at the moment. The poor in-game management. I think this has been a worry that I had towards the end of last season. Yes, we had a lot of our attackers out, but I could see similar patterns with Bruno Lage's team that when we ended the season really poorly, there was... The team looked fragile. They didn't look like they were able to control games anymore. It sort of felt like as soon as the momentum started to shift against them, everything just completely went out the window. And I'm seeing similar patterns here. And I think some of it is tactical. I think the substitutions, particularly this season, have been really bad. I really, really like Hwang. I think last season he was good. He's a clinical finisher, okay? I think sometimes people expect something from him which he's never done, which is be a player to drag us to wins. He's an excellent finisher. He's a box finisher. He's a clinical striker, but he doesn't offer much outside of that. And I understand that when we're chasing a game, we need someone who's going to make a difference. And this is what I mean by the in-game management. I think the substitutions are really strange. I think persisting with Hwang when you've got players on the bench that could potentially make more of an impact, like Guedes, like Rodrigo Gomez, who was, again, fantastic in pre-season. We've not really seen him. Carlos Forbes looked bright against Liverpool. I think his passing and things like that definitely need to be worked on. He gave the ball away a decent amount, but he was positive, he was bright, he was looking to create stuff, which is something that I think Wolves sort of lack. And I think Cunha also being played on the wing out wide, I don't think suits him. You got to play him centrally. I think for me that's where Gary O'Neill is sort of getting it wrong at the moment. I think the substitutions and where players are playing doesn't quite sit with me that well. I think Lamina playing in a more advanced role, I don't think he really suits that. Yes, he did play further forward last season when we had no one else to play up front, basically. There was a point where he was playing winger and centre forward. But he doesn't have to do that this season. So for me, it's okay to have him sitting as a bit more of maybe a box-to-box. He's not going to be an attacking midfielder. Stick Cunha in the centre. Have two proper wingers to feed Larson. Have, I don't know, maybe Gomez and Forbes. Just have out-and-out wingers. We've got to try something else. And I think Cunha at the moment, because he's out wide, he's drifting inside a lot. I feel like he's carrying a lot of the burden, or he feels like he's carrying a lot of the burden for the attacking output in this team. I think we need to maybe see some more trust between the players. But that's got to come from Gary O'Neill. He's got to set the system out. He's got to make sure the players know what they can expect of each other. And I think that's where I think there's some cracks starting to appear, but we'll see if that can change. Obviously, the poor run of form, pretty self-explanatory. We've just been on a really terrible run of form for quite some time. Don't really need too much to be said about that. I think if you look at the results from last season combined with this season, any other manager in the league would have, there would have been discussions. But I do think that last season we were really, really unlucky with injuries. So I think you've got to kind of cut him some slack. I do think we've had a really tough run of fixtures. So this is what I would say in response to the poor run of form. We've had a tough run of fixtures, yes, and he's also, I think, been pretty harshly done by the board. Now I know that there was an article that came out, earlier this week. Matt Hobbs, Jeff Shee, Hobbs making some comments about that not signing a centre back was the sort of the plan. For me, I don't like to question senior figures. I don't usually question Matt Hobbs that much because his recruitment has been excellent. But for me, not signing a centre-back is very strange. I think it was apparent to everyone that this was an area that needed reinforcements, particularly after Kilman left. And the Mosquera injury, Dawson being out with the virus, it made that abundantly clear. Bueno and Totti are solid centre-backs. They're good centre-backs, but O'Neill barely played Bueno last season, and he obviously doesn't fancy him that much. If Dawson, Totti, and Mosquera are fit, Bueno is not playing. So and Wolves were you got to remember, there was pretty solid rumours that we were looking to send Bueno out on loan. So God forbid, imagine if we'd sent him out on loan. Alfie Pond would be playing week in, week out, which I'm more than happy to get behind Alfie Pond. We've got an academy, that's what it's there for. But it's not fair on him to throw him in at the deep end when he's not really played anywhere near he's not played anywhere near Premier League level. So that puts a lot of pressure on him, and he's a young player, in a crucial part of his development. So I do think whilst we're on a poor run of form, I think there have been mitigating factors that we do have to take into account. I think for that reason, I think O'Neill deserves, I'd say 3 to 5 more games. I think the big one is Brentford. If you lose against Brentford, I think then you've got an international break. I think then maybe internal discussions are going to happen because you've got City next. Might be able to get something out of that. We were on a poor run of form last season and we beat City, and that kind of kick-started our season. So same thing could, lightning can strike twice. But we don't want to get to the easier run of fixtures in really, really poor form because your confidence is shot, and then the expectation is that you have to win these games. The Palace, the Fulham games, Southampton, Ipswich. you go into these games on poor form and everyone's sort of banking on these games to get us points. That's when, you know, the issues are going to happen if we don't win those games. So Brentford is massive for O'Neill. If the poor form continues, if we lose against Brentford, I seriously think things are going to crank up on him. And unfortunately, he's just a victim of what seems to be a bit of a cycle, in my opinion, at Wolves. There's the same sort of thing happening over and over again. Okay, and the third point, just to finish off this sort of O'Neill things, because I don't want to, you know, harp on about it too much. I think he deserves more time, at least 3 to 5 more games. I think the third thing is his attitude in the press. Pretty surprised, to be honest with you, by some of his comments. This kind of not, I suppose, victim mentality, this sort of down mentality of we've got to accept where we are, like, and the weird thing with the bookies mentioning the fact that we were the bookies underdogs basically for most of these games. Football's not played by odds. You know, the whole point of football is you defy those odds, and Wolves have done that time and time again under previous management. We've shown that it doesn't matter what the bookies' favourites are. We went to Besiktas away and City away in 1 week and won both. What were the odds on that? I'd like to know. You know, football is not played by odds. And that was a comment that really frustrated me, because confidence comes from the top down, and you've got to have a manager who's, yes, maybe internally saying something else, but what managers say in the press, I think, makes a difference. It's the public image that everyone has of the team and the mentality of the team. It's got to come from the top down, and I think his attitude in the press hasn't exactly helped his case. I think it's wearing thin on quite a lot of the fan base, this sort of woe is me attitude of, you know, we've got this injury and we've had this thing and we've got a tough run of fixtures. For me as a manager, you've got to G these players up. You're like, right, lads, you know, we've got a tough run of fixtures, but, you know, let's go out there, let's sort of show what we can do. And I think at points the players have looked like doing that, and it's not all O'Neill's fault. But I don't think that his comments in the press have exactly helped. He then came out and said that he believes we can beat Liverpool. So, look, I think maybe he's a little bit stuck as to what line to take. For me, he's just got to be honest. And look, if that's honestly how he feels, then I'm not really enthused by the sort of the negativity that's being put out in public statements at the moment. I think we've got to be more positive. I know it's hard and we're in a tough run of form, but sometimes you've just got to try and keep going. And I think that the comments that have been made sort of suggest that in and amongst the Wolves camp, there is a feeling of them being hard done by. So let me know in the comments, what do you think about Gary O'Neill? Does he deserve more games? Or do you think he should get the sack? Do you think Brentford, if we lose to Brentford, do you think he gets the sack? Or do you just still give him another couple of games to try and turn it around? Maybe an international break, reset, that sort of thing. And my third point is lack of depth. I've already touched on this a couple of times, so I'll keep it brief. The lack of centre-backs, again, so frustrating. I think for me, this is where some of the blame sort of goes onto Fosun. I think at times we've left ourselves short in areas where we should be planning. I think the squad planning hasn't been fantastic. I think left-back and centre-back for me were a little bit of a concern. We only had Ait-Nouri as a proper left-back. You've got Totti and Doherty, but left-back isn't their preferred position. So you've got basically one left-back at the club, and the other two players that can play there are sort of fill-in left-backs, which for me is you're kind of playing with fire there. And the centre-back situation is just really frustrating. I understand Hobbs's comments of switching to a back four. Yes, you don't need as many centre-backs, obviously, but you still need depth, and not just depth, quality as well, because they were looking at loaning out Bueno. What happens if you loan him out and you don't get another centre-back in? Then you've got Dawson, Totti and Mosquera. Mosquera's now out injured. Dawson, I don't think you can rely on Dawson to play week in, week out. He's getting on in age, he's experienced, he's an excellent defender, but you can't rely on him to play week in, week out. He's going to get injured. So what happens then? Then we have to go into the reserves. And last season we had the same thing with, you know, the issues with attacking players. We had a lot of injuries with attacking players, but we had to play academy players and Lamina basically up front. You know, we had midfielders playing on the wing. we don't want to, we can't be in a position where 6-7 games into the season, we're already down to 2 centre halves for the Liverpool game. We had 2 centre halves, senior centre halves fit and available. 6-7 games in for me is extremely poor squad planning. And this has been my issue with Wolves for a couple of years, is that the squad planning just, for me, there's always something missing. We either didn't get a backup centre forward, we didn't get another winger, we didn't balance the midfield right. We didn't, this time we didn't get depth in the central defensive positions. For me, it's frustrating because we should be we are an established Premier League team, and yet we're still having these sort of issues. So yeah, I think for me the lack of depth is what's going to cost us. I hope some of these academy lads can step up, and maybe Bueno, Totti, Dawson can stay fit, and maybe with some consistent game time they'll pick up some form. I don't think we've been atrocious defensively, but I do think that we have defenders that suffer from lapses in concentration. I think Totti for the Liverpool goal, the first goal, I think they just switch off a little bit, and the same thing for Szoboszlai. Great save by Johnston, gets his body in the way, but he's ghosting in from behind there. No one's tracking him, and that's where my concern lies. We have an okay number of centre backs, but is the quality in depth there? I don't really think so. I think that's where we might come unstuck this season. I mean, to be sure, it's sent in such a crucial position. For me, it's laughable. I mean, I'm laughing about it. It's laughable. Okay, so I'm going to end this video on some positivity. Oh my gosh, wow. What a word, positivity. Andre, enough said, really. Enough said. What a player. Unbelievable signing. So good in the tackle, reads the game extremely well, excellent passing range. He's a little bit of a mix of Moutinho and Neves in one. He's faultless. I mean, his debut, obviously, against Newcastle, 100% passing rate, pass completion rate. I know it doesn't get us a win, but if we're talking about Andre in isolation, I think he's been a shining light in what's been a pretty rough few weeks for Wolves. He's been a consistent 7-8 out of 10. Just looks so composed on the ball. I think what impresses me the most is that he's come into the Premier League and straight away he looks up to pace. He looks like he can deal with working in tight spaces, which is a defensive midfielder that you just simply have to have. You've got to be able to turn on the ball and be able to play out under pressure. He does that magnificently. I think he leads by example extremely well, and he gives us that sort of extra solidity, which I think is what has contributed to us kind of stealing up a little bit since the Chelsea defeat. I think we look more solid as a unit. I think finding the balance is going to be key, but Andre as a player for me has proved to be a really good signing, and if he keeps up the form that he has, I can't see us going down with the midfield that we have. If Gomez and Lamina, once they sort of hit form again, we've got such a good midfield. And for me, Andre is going to be a key part of us wanting to stay up this season. I think he's an early contender for me to, if he keeps up the form, to be player of the season, and a player that will do extremely well. And will probably again be linked with a lot of the big boys as he was when he was at his previous club. So yeah, really happy to see him slot in really well. Looks like he, physically he's adapted very well to the Premier League. I just love watching him play. I'm a sucker for a midfielder that just reads the game really well, and he is one of those. He's always a step ahead. He's one of the first midfielders to always get a foot in and start get us on our way. I think is a real game changer. Okay, thank you for watching this second installment. I know it's again a little bit of we've got some negatives and positives to take. I think what we need to remember is it's still early in the season, and we've been in this position before, and we've come out of it and we've stayed up. So I don't think it's not panic stations yet. I think we need to get to the international break and reassess. If we get a draw or beat Brentford, I think we'll probably be feeling better about the situation already. That's all it takes is one good performance and a good result to kind of switch the mentality. So I'm just hoping, if we can get something against Brentford, then happy days. I think it is a must win though, and Brentford have got a lot of injuries. As long as we don't concede in the first minute, I think we might be okay. Let me know in the comments as well. Remember, who would you start in midfield. How long does Gary O'Neill have? And also leave me your thoughts on Andre and any of the new signings like Carlos Forbes, for example, who had a decent little cameo performance. But thank you very much for watching again, and I hope to catch you in the comment section down below on the next installment of What We Learn.